Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. And I would like to welcome you once again to this workshop today. The workshop today is brought to you by the Global Pharmacovigilance Group, the International Society of Pharmacovigilance in Africa, the Africa chapter, and the Global Health Network. A little bit about our topic today. The topic is about the priorities for pharmacovigilance in low and middle income countries during the COVID-19 pandemic. And my name is Dr. Helen Biomirenda-Dije. I am the Director for Product Safety at the National Drug Authority in Uganda. It is the drug regulatory agency. And I'm responsible for pharmacovigilance and clinical trials at the agency, but I am also the president of the Africa chapter of the International Society of Pharmacovigilance. And I'm delighted that you could join us today. And I would also like to introduce, or at least mention, the panelists today. With me from the ISOP Africa chapter, members of the executive committee, and Dr. Christabel Kayemba is the vice president of the Africa chapter. And we have the secretary, who is Comfort Ogar, and Wangui Mathenge. Dr. Wangui Mathenge is our honorable secretary, our honorable treasurer. We'll also have the panelists, Dr. Elizabeth Allen and Ryan Walker. So you are all very welcome. And today we'll be discussing the Global Health Network and Global Pharmacovigilance Platform and the findings of their most recent survey of the current pharmacovigilance priorities in low and middle income countries. ISOP Africa is the Africa chapter, has just been recently introduced. We have been in office as the executive committee since November 2019. And our main objectives as a chapter is to develop and foster pharmacovigilance on the African continent. And we are quite advanced in having set our agenda in this, and we have involved a number of countries. We've held a number of workshops and symposia, and would like to also, as one of our objectives, is also to create more avenues for networking, and also to encourage and promote research in pharmacovigilance in Africa. There has been technical working groups which have been formed, and just briefly, these are the 4 technical working groups. The regulatory group, looking at regulatory systems strengthening. We also have the research and academia group, working group, which is looking at advocating and spearheading pharmacovigilance-led research in Africa, and also the communications, that is providing support to communications and communication strategies for the chapter and for countries which are interested. And also the practice group, which is looking at pharmacovigilance practitioners in Africa, and also aligning standards for good pharmacovigilance practice. And just over to today, the brief highlight that we have this meeting. The most important goal for us as ISOP Africa, with the collaboration we've had today with the Global Health Forum, is to raise the importance of pharmacovigilance as a health priority among African countries. So I'd like to briefly introduce our first speaker for the program today. Welcome, Dr. Elizabeth Allen. And Elizabeth is a pharmacist and the head of clinical research for the Collaborating Center for Optimizing Antimalarial Therapy at the Division of Clinical Pharmacology at the University of Cape Town. She has an academic interest in pre and post-marketing assessment of drug safety and will be presenting an overview of the Global Health Network, introducing to us the Global Pharmacovigilance platform. Welcome, Dr. Allen. Thank you.
Many thanks, Madam Chair. It's a privilege to be speaking alongside you and the Executive Committee of ISOF Africa. So yes, I'll be briefly introducing you to the Global Health Network. I'm sure a lot of you on the call, excuse me, are familiar with the network, so welcome back. But there's always something new. It's always changing and improving. So I think even if you're familiar, there'll be new information. So this is the website address at the top, tghn.org. And the overall ethos is about facilitating health research and delivering capacity development all over the world with a focus on low and middle income countries. So this would be the, if you go onto the front page of the network, this is what you would see. And there's various ways to access the huge amount of information that's within the network. So in the top right of the picture there are links to the member hubs. There's about 60 member hubs now, cross-cutting research tools and resources. And then in the bottom left is links through to what we call the knowledge sharing hubs. So these are communities of practice which share a theme, whether it's a disease, a region, or an organization. And on the right-hand side, links to the capacity development and process improvement, cross-cutting applications, which are focused on training, the myriad resources, professional development, all aiming to build skills and careers that deliver evidence to change practice. Right, just need to move my slide on. So going into the member hubs site, as I said, this started off about more than 10, maybe 12 years ago, focused on clinical trials, but has grown into a very diverse network of different communities of practice, which you can see there. And the way they presented change all the time because there's new communities who come along. So clicking on these little boxes will take you into a member area of your interest. And they are connected in the back. So this is the real importance and strength of the Global Health Network, in that each member coordination team who is presenting a gateway for their community of practice can really pull in from all the other communities of practice. And something like pharmacovigilance, which is such a cross-cutting activity, you know, this is exactly what we do. Is if we see something relating to, for instance, the COVID community hub, we can feature that on our page so that it's easier for the membership to access the information because of the sheer volume of information out there. So it's essentially an online science park, a mechanism for knowledge exchange and accessing myriad tools, templates, and guidance. This isn't done by one group alone. The hub sits in the Oxford University in the UK, but it's collaborations with many organizations across the world, of which this is just a few. So I talked about some of the cross-cutting applications, and this is just a snapshot of a few. So an example would be the process map, which is an interactive map guiding the process of initiating and actually taking one through a clinical research study. And you would open the map and go onto each of those little orange bubbles there, and it would pull together the tools and resources that are sitting in the digital infrastructure behind, whether it's about writing a protocol, or getting regulatory approvals or such like. A newer development is the Global Drug Development Process Map, which is a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funded process map to do with early drug development for drugs, devices, advanced delivery system development. The training center has a wealth of e-learning courses, from single courses through to modular, from generic issues such as good clinical practice through to specialist topics such as malaria microscopy, and all, as I say, developed in collaboration with other stakeholders. And then an example of career development tool is this Competency Wheel or Competency Framework by WHO TDR, that one can go in, any member of a research team or anybody involved in research can go in and map their competencies and then work up competencies using whatever tools and resources are on the network. So basically, this is a vast network of organizations and other networks pulling together with research teams, health workers and policymakers anywhere in the world. It's open access. One doesn't have to be sign up as a member to access most of the information, but if you're wanting to do an e-learning course, that is when you would sign up as a member. And obviously we would want you to sign up, because then we can send you newsletters of all the exciting things that come along. So with a broad focus on research skills training, career development, and knowledge mobilization, there's over 500,000 registered members, over 300 million courses taken, and these are available in a variety of translations, webinars, workshops, and hundreds of thousands of documents. So this obviously is a very sophisticated digital infrastructure, but like I say, with the hub model allows one to go straight to the field that you are interested in. I think what's important is that this is about practical how to do research or practice in a particular field between diseases, regions, and teams. And it's about equity and access to resources or training or whatever, but also contribution of knowledge, which is so important. And really ensuring that those working and living in low middle income countries don't get left behind, particularly in this new shift from traditional, let's say, drug development phases 1 through to 4, to a more research ecosystem where there's blurred now boundaries between a lot of these activities. And again, pharmacovigilance is something that sits across a lot of that. So, that's the future, and the network is there to ensure that everybody can ride along with it. Moreover, in terms of putting real focus on the Global South, the Global Health Network is moving to set up and has set up regional centers through the Africa CDC, Fiocruz in Brazil, and ICDDBR in Bangladesh, and with a collaboration with the UK Health Data Research new global arm, a real focus on data science, which is going to be critical for this new health research ecosystem. And then behind the scenes, there's a real focus on understanding what the members need. And the whole idea of a community practice is that the content and direction is based on need. So there are embedded mixed methods protocols involving surveys, interviews, and focus groups. The network currently has data from over 7,000 individuals from across 153 countries worldwide to really understand what people on the ground need to do their work, and also what they need from the network. So just as an example, this was a survey which was looking at who people were, what role they were having in their work, where they work, and in terms of their experience. But we're here today to talk about pharmacovigilance. So this is, as I say, one of the member hubs, and I was involved in setting this up a few years ago through some seed funding from a Gates Foundation malaria consortium. So a few of us who are working in drug safety and for anti-malarials decided it would be fantastic to have a spot on the Global Health Network devoted to pharmacovigilance. There was a slight focus on antimalarials at the start, but I think we always had this vision that it would be quite broad, and again, broad from early phase drug development through to post-marketing, and even some non-drug safety issues. So the site looks much like a lot of the other hubs on the network, with tabs for resources, access to specific training, education, and career advice for those interested in pharmacovigilance. There's interactive options within the community pages, and obviously events. Please do go and have a look and browse. Just two things I wanted to mention right now is there's still a bit of time left to apply for funded doctoral training in trials methods, one of the projects which is related to adverse event analysis in clinical trials. And also we're about to launch a link to some funding by the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness and Innovation, CEPI, to an 8-week training course for Data Safety and Monitoring Board members in Asia and South Asia. So that's just an example of things that we try to keep an eye on. And we also have our Twitter feed for the same. So delving a bit more into the pages, the resources, this would be anything from, we've got the CIOM's glossary of drug safety terms, the organizations and consortia, and training and careers. So in terms of organizations, we've obviously got the International Society for Pharmacovigilance, ISOP, and other international organizations, links to their chapters, particularly in low and middle income countries. And then I think we've pulled together, the main sort of groups working in this area, such as ISOP, CIOMS, WHO, Uppsala, but also tried to, we've come across sort of less well-known groups which also are doing really good work in the field of drug safety. So groups who are looking at de-prescribing, groups who have open access material on QT prolongation, drugs that cause QT prolongation, the Equator Network that has advice on reporting harms from randomized controlled trials, and then some patient groups as well. The Africa Pharmacovigilance Consortia I mentioned, these are EDCTP funded consortia in East and West Africa, and then there's a new one in Southern Africa. Articles, we welcome any articles on a particular topic. This is an example of pharmacovigilance in pregnancy, and which we can catalogue. And this is something we'd really like other people to start contributing to. We don't want to generate all this information ourselves. And it's really maybe a safe space to start writing about the field that you're in, if you're not typically publishing, for instance, that will be peer reviewed. And then network participants. I mean, when I started out in pharmacovigilance, it's difficult to know what's out there, what jobs are, should I do a postgraduate degree, for instance. So we've gathered together some descriptions of people's experiences of how they found their job, what qualifications they needed, a range of jobs, how to find a topic, how to find a supervisor. And again, this is an area we'd really like to grow if that was something that was interesting to the members. So this is my last slide. Last but one, just to give a snapshot, we obviously monitor who's accessing the network. This is just from January last month. At that point, we had nearly 7,000 members to the page. Members you can be a member of any of the pages on the Global Health Network. And again, for pharmacovigilance, this is probably quite useful. And then, we had about 2,500 sessions. And in terms of the countries, India has been at the top of our number of views and sessions for since the start, really. We also have visitors from the US, Europe, and also many African, Asian, and South American sites. So before I finish, I just want to briefly touch on ISOP and the Global Health Network and global pharmacovigilance in particular. I mean, we really feel, I mean, I've been a member of ISOP. I've been to ISOP conferences and attended webinars. And I mean, obviously we have a shared interest in the science and practice of pharmacovigilance. I feel we've got complementary memberships in low middle income countries across the world, reflecting the very cross-cutting nature of pharmacovigilance. So whether it's from health authorities, drug developers, researchers, NGOs, funders, particularly healthcare workers who are doing this or have a responsibility for pharmacovigilance day in, day out, and then potentially patients and the public. So I think there's real scope for collaboration to connect excellence around the world, achieving equity in who gets involved in and who benefits. So this is just the start, I think, of our discussions as to how we can do that and complement each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Liz, for that very broad overview on the Global Health Network and the excellent work that is being done by the network. And we at ISOP Africa, we're quite excited about this opportunity to collaborate with the network to increase access for our members and those interested in pharmacovigilance in Africa generally, so they can have greater access to PV resources. We're really excited about that. And so moving on to our second presentation for the day, I am delighted to welcome Ryan. Ryan is going to make his presentation. So Ryan is a pharmacist and a PhD student at the Oxford Center for Global Health Research at the University of Oxford. Ryan's thesis seeks to understand whether a community of practice approach can improve pharmacovigilance outcomes in low resource settings. His current research looks to identify priorities for pharmacovigilance in low and middle income countries during the COVID-19 pandemic by harnessing this community approach. Ryan is also a co-coordinator of the Global Network alongside Dr. Alan. So Ryan will be presenting on the outcomes of the Global Pharmacovigilance's recent survey, which sought to identify the current pharmacovigilance priorities in low and middle income countries. So we're delighted to have Ryan make his presentation. Ryan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Comfort. And thank you, Liz, as well, for your presentation. Let me just make sure everything is fantastic. Okay, so as, well, good morning, good evening, good night, everyone, wherever you happen to be based. As Comfort has mentioned, I'm going to be presenting on some of the recent work that I've been doing as part of my PhD with global pharmacovigilance and the Global Health Network. Particularly in relation to a recent survey that we have run that sought to identify priorities for pharmacovigilance in LMICs specific to the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm going to start with a brief overview of the wider project that this research is part of. As I mentioned, this is part of my PhD, so I'll give a brief background to the rationale and methods of the overarching project. Then I'll move on to give a description of the survey design. I'll present the results, and I'll outline the next steps as well. And afterwards, we'll move on to a Q&A session for both this presentation and for Liz's presentation beforehand. So, as I mentioned, this research forms part of my the wider project that is my PhD and my thesis, the title of which is, Can a Community of Practice Approach Improve Pharmacovigilance Capacity in Low Resource Settings? I apologize for this rather text-heavy slide to begin with, but I think it gives a good, important summary of the project rationale, and probably discusses many concerns that many of us are already well aware of. So undertaking effective drug safety monitoring can be particularly challenging in low resource settings due to a lack of infrastructure, weak regulatory systems, and limited access to training and education opportunities. This project looks to harness the membership of the online pharmacovigilance hub, globalpharmacovigilance.org, and explore its potential to work together in a community of practice on specific challenges facing pharmacovigilance in low resource settings. And Liz has already expanded on this idea of community of practice. In this case, we define it as a group of people who share a concern, a set of problems, or are passionate about a topic, and who deepen their knowledge and expertise in this area by interacting on an ongoing basis. In the case of this project, that community of practice is made up of the membership of Global Pharmacovigilance, and expanding from that, the wider Global Health Network membership. So I'm going to move straight into discussing the survey to move on to discussing the priorities that we have identified. So the aims of this survey as part of this project were to identify and prioritize pharmacovigilance knowledge gaps in LMICs with specific relation to the COVID-19 pandemic. There were secondary aims of this. We wanted to better understand the demographic spread of membership within our pharmacovigilance community of practice. And sort of tertiary aims were to assess attitudes towards pharmacovigilance within this community and to gather data on the usage and user experience of the Global Pharmacovigilance platform. I won't be discussing these final two aims too much in detail in this presentation, as I want to focus more on these priorities that we've identified. To give you a brief idea into what the survey looked like and what sort of questions we were asking, I began with a literature search and discussion with PV experts around the globe, and attended some various workshops to identify a list of potential topics that were being discussed as areas for improvement or areas for concern within pharmacovigilance in LMICs during the pandemic. And this literature search and these discussions generated a list of 43 different pharmacovigilance topics, which were then grouped into 5 different themes. And you can see an example from the survey here. One of our themes was general vaccine pharmacovigilance, and you can see the sort of topics that covered, terminology used in vaccine PV, recognizing AFIs, how to report AFIs, so on and so forth. And each person or each respondent to the survey was asked to identify whether they thought they needed to know more about that particular topic within pharmacovigilance. So whether they agree or disagree that they need to know more about that specific area. Now, as I've mentioned, these topics, this list of 43 areas, was just something that I pulled together myself from the literature and from discussion with various people. And so to ensure that we had captured an accurate representation of concerns for pharmacovigilance at the moment, the survey went through a process of validation. Again, I'm not going to go too much into the validation process, but it was quite a robust methodology. It went through a 2-round assessment known as a Content Validity Index assessment, which is essentially an expert-driven rating system, where content experts or validators are asked to indicate how relevant they think the survey questions are to the survey aims. As I said, this went through 2 rounds of that process, and we also developed a hybrid approach to introduce debriefing discussions with the validators to gather more qualitative feedback and in-depth analysis of exactly what the priorities were at this moment. All of the questions and themes within the survey that was eventually launched achieved a level of agreement. I think it was greater than 90%, which is a strong level of agreement that these questions were relevant to the concept that we were trying to measure. In terms of who these validators were, these content validators, there were 10 of them, and there was a varying range of experience in pharmacovigilance activities. As you can see here, the average experience was nearly 20 years, 18.2, but we had validators who had a lot of experience in pharmacovigilance, were very experienced, up to 40 years, but also people who were quite new to pharmacovigilance as a profession as well. As you see, some people less than a year. but we thought it was important to have a broad spread of range of experience so we could gather these different perspectives. Geographically, you can see that there was a broad range of global areas involved in the design of this survey. We had 10 validators that were from 10 different countries. For the sake of anonymization in this chart, we have represented the validators by the United Nations GeoScheme region that they represent. But you can see that there is a wide representation of PV stakeholders from the global south. And we also had input from Northern Europe and Australia and New Zealand as well. In addition, what isn't recorded here is a wide range of job roles also represented. So we had qualified persons for pharmacovigilance, pharmacovigilance specialists, academics, hospital pharmacists, pharmacoepidemiologists, a broad spread of professions within the remit of pharmacovigilance. So the survey was launched in September last year and was live for 5 weeks. It was distributed via the Global Pharmacovigilance Hub and other relevant hubs on the Global Health Network, via social media, and also via email to the Global Pharmacovigilance email list as well. So the results of the survey. I'll start with some demographics. We received 155 responses to the survey, and 54 countries were represented in those responses. You can see we got our highest response rates from India and from Kenya, but we got good responses from the rest of Southern Central Africa, Western Africa as well, Latin America and Central America, and also Southeast Asia, but also North America, Europe, and Australia as well. Of those 54 countries that were represented, 70% of them were low and middle income countries, but perhaps more importantly, of the 155 responses, the vast majority, 85%, were from people based in LMICs. Of the people that weren't based in LMICs, around half indicated that they had some connection to pharmacovigilance in LMICs, whether that was a professional connection, for example, they supported pharmacovigilance work in an LMIC, or whether it was a personal interest. A wide range of roles was represented in the survey respondents, which is shown here. You can see we had a large number of pharmacists respond, but also people based in academia and research, pharmacovigilance scientists, QPPVs, students, and 44% or 45% of respondents indicated that they held more than one role, which is perhaps not surprising. We are well aware that many people based in pharmacovigilance wear lots of different hats. Similarly, a range of institutions was also represented by the respondents. You see a large response from the university and college sector, but also the hospital sector in general, if you combine the results of public and private hospitals. And a wide range of experience was also demonstrated. You can see that most participants were fairly new to pharmacovigilance as a profession. Most responding that they've been involved for 5 years or less, but we did have more experienced people complete the survey as well, up to 20+ years. And half of respondents indicated that they engage in pharmacovigilance activities either once a week or more frequently. So, in terms of priorities, as I mentioned before, 43 different pharmacovigilance topics were included in this survey, and they were grouped into 5 themes, as we saw earlier with the general vaccine pharmacovigilance theme. These 5 themes were general vaccine pharmacovigilance, COVID-19 vaccine pharmacovigilance, COVID-19 vaccine pharmacovigilance according to patient group. And when we say patient group here, we mean more in relation to clinical grouping, and I'll explain a little bit more about that shortly. The pharmacovigilance of medicines used to manage COVID-19, and pharmacovigilance systems and communication. What we're going to present in these results is a top 10 of these 43 priorities that were ranked, as these are the ones that obviously we deem to be the highest priority at the moment. And what this graph shows is what percentage of questions in these themes were present in our top 10 priorities. Or perhaps a better way to a better way to describe that is that how many of this top 10 were representative of these themes. You can see that in the top 10, topics relating to vaccine pharmacovigilance and patient group were very frequent. Also, we saw sort of an equal level of frequency of topics relating to medicines, systems and communication, and COVID-19 vaccine PV in general. What you don't see in the top 10 at all, you'll notice there's only 4 themes here, there's 5 here, is we didn't get any of the general vaccine pharmacovigilance questions, things relating to terminology and so on and so forth, that were ranked highly in our priorities list. So if we break this thematic approach down a little bit to look at the individual priorities, we see this, and these are on the left, the top 10 priorities that we identified from our 43, going from the highest ranked to the lowest ranked. What you can see on this chart, if you look at the bars on the right, is the level of agreement to people indicating that they felt that they needed to know more about these specific areas of pharmacovigilance. So the blue bar, both shades of the blue bar, indicate how much people agree that they need to know more about that area. And you can see if you look at our highest ranked priority, which is the safety of COVID-19 medicines in specific patient groups, that counting down from 100, 95% of our respondents indicated that they need to know more about that area. And if you look at the entirety of the top 10, you can see that overall there's an extremely high level of agreement that respondents feel they need to know more about those areas. So even from our 10th ranked priority, you see a 92% level of agreement that people need to know more about this area. Now, I appreciate that this at the moment is a bit of a list, so we can perhaps simplify that by coding these to relate to these the question themes that I showed earlier. So perhaps this now makes a bit more sense, and you can see that questions grouped in the COVID-19 vaccine PV patient group theme, we had 4 of those present in our top 10, and then 2 of each of the rest. So you can see that this was the most represented group. But what I'd like to do now is go through, or at least read out, some of these priorities individually. And these are in no particular order here now. And so our top 10 priorities identified in this survey were the safety of COVID-19 vaccination in children and adolescents, the safety of COVID-19 vaccination in people who are immunosuppressed, the safety of COVID-19 vaccination in people with existing comorbidities, the safety of COVID-19 vaccination in pregnancy. We also have the safety of COVID-19 medicines in special patient groups, drug-drug interactions of COVID-19 medicines, analysis of COVID-19 vaccine safety data, the interactions of COVID-19 vaccines with other drugs, how to effectively communicate COVID-19 vaccine or medicine safety information, and ongoing global COVID-19 PV work and stakeholders. Now, as well as these themes that were grouped in the survey, there are common themes that emerge across the results as well. For example, quite obviously, we can see that the safety of vaccines and therapeutics in different clinical groups is of concern. And we see that both amongst the vaccine group and of the medicine group, these different clinical areas all ranked very highly in our list of priorities. What we also see is that drug-drug and vaccine-drug interactions are a concern. And these were 2 areas that were completely separate in their position in the survey, but both achieved almost an equal score in terms of their level of agreement, in terms of their priority ranking. So it demonstrates that interactions are a strong concern. And then we also have issues relating to communicating safety information, safety data analysis, and understanding more about the global PV landscape. In addition to our ranking scales and our prioritization, we did gather qualitative results, and there's an enormous amount of qualitative data. Some of it is still being reviewed, and I'm not going to share all of it now, but I will give an example. At the end of each theme, respondents were asked to indicate if there were any other areas within that theme that they felt weren't included in the survey, or if they wanted to expand on any of their thoughts. And this is just a sort of thematic outline of the question relating to vaccine safety in special patient groups, as that was the most common theme in the top 10. And you can see that other areas that people were discussing were how socioeconomic factors can affect vaccine safety, how things like poverty, ethnicity, people based in rural populations. We also saw expansions on some of the items in the survey. For example, in relation to the pregnancy topic, people indicated that they wanted to know also about the safety in women planning pregnancy. In relation to children and adolescents, people were asking if there was any information about vaccination in neonates. Perhaps the most common area of expansion was the safety of COVID-19 vaccination in people with comorbidities, and particularly there was interest in chronic illness and disability. Cancer was a clinical area that was brought up a lot, as were endocrine diseases, people with organ dysfunction, autoimmune diseases as well. So there's a lot of information generated from the survey and quite a lot to take in, but what can we conclude so far? So Global Pharmacovigilance's membership is a diverse global community representing a broad range of pharmacovigilance stakeholders with a large membership base in LMICs. And we see this from the geographic data that we've gathered from the survey, as well as the demographic data, the profession data, and the experience-related data as well. But what we're more interested in here is what are the priorities, or what can we conclude are the priorities for pharmacovigilance in LMICs during the COVID-19 pandemic? And the answer to this is, it's to be determined. And I'm going to expand a little bit more on this in the next few slides. We have our top 10 ranking, but further research is needed to fully reach a consensus on these priorities. As I've mentioned, the level of agreement for this top 10 was extremely close. The survey was also conducted 4 months ago, and the pandemic moves extremely quickly, as we know. So while there are now greater priorities that come to the forefront, do you find as an individual that these priorities relate to your setting? And so this links nicely into the next steps for this project. After this presentation and the Q&A session, we plan to host a discussion section for the remainder of the workshop. And in this discussion, we invite all the attendees of this workshop to join the discussion on the priorities identified in the survey, their relevance to your setting, and how they can be addressed, and how we can move forwards. Together, we hope to determine consensus on the highest priorities for pharmacovigilance in LMICs right now. And at the end of this discussion, we'll run a poll to identify the highest priorities of those discussed in the survey. Now, moving forward, after this discussion, and after we have this top ranked priorities from the discussion, from the priorities outlined in the survey, we're looking to form some working groups to address the highest priorities identified. So all participants of this workshop and all members of Global Pharmacovigilance will be invited to join the working groups. And members of the working groups are invited to work together to address the highest ranked priorities with the support of the Global Health Network and using the Global Pharmacovigilance platform as a space for communication, learning, and dissemination of outputs. I'm going to finish my presentation there. So these are my references. I'll say thank you very much. And as we move into the Q&A session, as I realized there was an enormous amount of information provided there, I am going to leave the top 10 priorities identified from the survey up on my screen. These are in no particular order, just for your perusal. Thank you very much.
I'll go to Naima Nasser. We have a question from Naima Nasser, and he or she says, hi, Ryan, great presentation and work on PV priorities. Do you think these priorities can be extended beyond the pandemic? I can see that they focus on safety mostly, which is relevant across board. Ryan, do you want to take that?
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, Comfort, and thank you, Naima. Yeah, I would absolutely agree. You're right. These priorities definitely can be extended beyond the pandemic. Many of these areas are contextualized within the issue of COVID-19 specific to the vaccines or specific to medicines. But in reality, safety of medicines in special patient groups has always been a concern of pharmacovigilance, and in many respects were areas that perhaps needed further research and discussion before the pandemic. It's perhaps now just that the pandemic has brought these further to light. So absolutely, I would say, yes, these are things that can be extended beyond COVID and applied in different contexts. Just to discuss the idea of forming working groups to address some of these particular priorities. It may be that if we form working groups and let's say in 6 months time or a year's time, the group decides that this priority or this area or this focus on even COVID-19 is no longer relevant, it's no longer the primary concern, then the beauty of this working group methodology is that that's absolutely okay, it's fine. And if that's the consensus of the working group, then we can shift either the topic completely, or they can shift to focus the, let's say, the core of the topic, let's say drug-drug interactions, to focus on a different context other than COVID. But yes, absolutely, I would agree, that definitely extend beyond the pandemic.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan, for that fantastic question and answer. The next question I have is from Nader Stadler. Nader says, hello, Ryan. Thanks for the great talk and insights. Regarding priorities and your comments on things yet to be determined, could you or members in the room comment on their experience with usability and or availability of tools, e.g. the MedSafety app or others you use in other countries to support or advance work in the reporting and monitoring of adverse events associated with medicines and vaccines during the pandemic? Thanks a lot. Ryan, I hope you got that. I think the person wants you to speak a bit about tools used, availability of tools used for PV.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Comfort. I may be disappointing here and actually ask the ISOP committee, the ISOP Africa committee, if perhaps you have a greater knowledge of this than myself, as it's not something I've had a great amount of experience with whilst completing my PhD at the moment. So I would say perhaps if the committee or even Liz or anyone else on the call has an experience in that area, please do feel free to share your comments.
Great, yeah, thanks for that, Ryan. I think I can give that a shot, and I welcome any of the ISOP members, Helen, Christabel, Wangui, to also chime in. So basically, I think I can speak at least about MedSafety app, which is quite used in a number of countries. I think, at least I know, I can say more than 10 countries for now. Probably it's a lot more, but about 10 countries that are using MedSafety app for to support spontaneous reporting. And then, of course, there is the VigiFlow that is supported by the UMC, that is widely used by a number of countries in LMICs as well. And then there are other custom tools that have been developed by different projects. Case in point, there is the PVIMS pharmacovigilance monitoring systems that was developed by Management Sciences for Health and is used by a number of LMIC countries as well. So there's quite a number of tools out there that countries use to support data collection in LMICs. I would welcome any of my colleagues to jump in and add any additional tools that they are aware of. Helen, Christabel Wangui, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Comfort. I have a lot of experience with a number of tools used in Uganda. Of course, one of them is the MedSafety app. And maybe what you have not mentioned that I would like to share is the toll-free line, where we've had direct reports from the patients, and our numbers have exponentially increased because of that direct link to the patients. Of course, when we talk about this community of practice, we see a number of issues that were raised directly by the patients, and so these are some of the issues. Of course, the disadvantages, because the reports are many, it takes a lot more time sieving through the calls and trying to get feedback to them. But the issue of reporting tools is having something that can quickly analyze and give feedback, and that is what helps to support reporting and advance the work in reporting, whether it is from the patients or from the healthcare workers. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe just to add also on what Helena said and comfort, yeah, quite a number of countries also have implemented the electronic reporting, and the beauty about this is, for example, like Kenya and I know Zimbabwe, which are linked to Vigiflow, and there is like direct transmission of whatever reports they get from their countries, and then it's submitted also to the global database. So these are some of the ways in which countries are working and supporting. And within the Vigiflow, also the global database, I think COVID was, I would say the COVID-19 pandemic kind of became like a blessing in disguise, because initially you'll find that most of the pharmacovigilance centers were actually not really focusing on reporting of AEFIs as much as, yes, maybe they are getting it, but you'll find that within even the Vigiflow now, the tools were updated and you're able to submit the AEFIs from COVID-19 vaccine. So I believe these are some of the ways in which just advancing the monitoring of these adverse events following medicines and vaccines is going on. And also a number of countries, as Elena said, and Kenya is also almost launching a USSD code for reporting, and this is targeting the patient. And as you saw Ryan's presentation, that is one area where most people need to focus on the patients themselves, because these are major key stakeholders in supporting safety monitoring activities. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. I think we may, how much time do we have on this session? I can't see, I'm not timing it. Do we have time to take additional questions, or should we have the responses given in the Q&A box? Ryan, Adam?
We've got, so it's just come to 2 o'clock. So we have about 45 minutes left for a discussion on what people think in relation to these priorities in their settings and whether they're still relevant. Perhaps we could move on to the discussion, and then if there's time, we'll come back to the questions and we can get back to them in the chat box as well.
All right, sounds good. So I think in the meantime, we'll be responding to the questions that are in the chat box, and then we'll move on to the next session. So thank you, and over to you, Wangui.
So thank you so much, Comfort, for taking us through the second part of this webinar that we've had with the Global Health Network team. For now, I'd like to introduce everyone else to the third part, or the last part of our webinar today. And we wanted to take this opportunity and open up the discussion and just allow people to, give their reactions, give their comments with regards to the presentations that have been provided today. Yeah.
Brian is asking if there are any cooperations or collaborations within Africa in regard to pharmacovigilance. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So,
yeah.
Pardon?
Yes, that's exactly what he asked.
Okay, so I'll try to answer to the best I can. So yes, there've been collaborations, ongoing collaborations in strengthening pharmacovigilance within the region. And one key collaboration has been through the African Medicines Regulatory Harmonization Project, which was looking at strengthening regulatory systems within the different economic regional blocks. For example, the East African Community, the Intergovernmental Authority, that is IGAD, Intergovernmental Authority for, sorry, I've forgotten the name in full, but IGAD. And we have like also some regions, the SADC regions, where a lot of harmonization has been going on of the systems, and in particular for pharmacovigilance, I'll take an example of East African Community and the IGAD community, where through the harmonization and collaboration that has been going on, there've been adoption and harmonization of pharmacovigilance systems, like guidelines, tools, for example, looking at the electronic reporting tools, Kenya was among the first countries that implemented this. And through this, there's been sharing of information, and countries like Tanzania, Rwanda, visiting and also like training with Kenya and capacity building just to see how this is working. And then they're able to implement the same in their countries. We've had like Zimbabwe, which also is one of the countries that was able to work with Kenya and implement this also system within. And we appreciate that with the coming up of the African Medicines Regulatory Authority, AMA, so there are processes in place that are ongoing on to see how data that is being collected from pharmacovigilance can be synchronized and used for decision-making within the region. And just as Brian said rightly, we cannot work in isolation, and that's why this harmonization process activities have been going on. And we also have collaborations also with other outside the region. And like, for example, there is a currently ongoing collaboration between Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Rwanda through an EDCTP supported grant, where there's been a lot of work on strengthening of pharmacovigilance within this region. And also through the same, there is also the PAVIA project, which has Tanzania, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Nigeria, and I think Eswatini, which are also collaborating and strengthening these systems. So I believe this is a good starting point for Africa. And once the systems become mature and the collaborations are well established, it will make work easier, since the patients are kind of the same, the data you're collecting and the information that is being picked can be utilized to just ensure that the patients are benefiting from the information that is picked and their health is taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you, Christabel, for that. Because I see we are running short of time, there are some reactions that I'd like to read and maybe elicit more discussion. So I've seen a comment from Joe Adu Manu from FDA Ghana, and he says the Med Safety app by the FDA Ghana has been very instrumental to healthcare workers and the general public in reporting ADRs. We also have Victoria from NDA Uganda. I believe the key issue facing LMICs is safety communication. There is some lack of hesitance and confidence in communicating safety information, thereby creating an environment of lack of trust between the ministries, regulators, and the public. As a ripple effect, we end up having vaccine hesitance, infodynamics becomes unmanageable. I'm assuming information becomes unmanageable. We also see the same reaction presented in Kenya through Dorothy Iwak. She says that, yes, a lot of this, the reporting issue, there is a lot of hesitance in reporting. where the healthcare workers feel that they do not get any feedback. A lot has been changing, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic. There are also increased interest in PV in the general hospitals, yeah? So the themes apply. So we also have someone from Nigeria who says the themes apply in Nigeria, especially in the safety of COVID-19 vaccinations in pregnancy, as the women need to be monitored for the safety of the vaccines on pregnancy outcomes. Wow, that's amazing. So thank you very much for sending your comments, your questions. Maybe this would be the best time to also jump in and maybe ask everyone in general, because some of actually Ryan's presentation basically just analyzes, or it presents to us the survey that was conducted about 4 months ago. And currently, based on the reactions that we're getting from people, and we just need to know more, especially from people working in the industry. Do you think the current priorities that were highlighted, are they still relevant to date? Now we're in 2022, we're getting quite a lot of areas getting access to the COVID-19 vaccine. So what are your reactions? What's going on in that direction? Are we getting to know, is a issue of COVID vaccine PV becoming an issue? Is there awareness in your area? What do you think?
Maggie, I don't know if you mind if I just jump in for a second, but yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And some of the comments that we're getting in the chat and some of what people have contributed have been really, really interesting so far. I know we have Navni discussing his concerns with clinical trials and the safety of vaccination with infectious diseases. And it'd be really interesting to hear if anyone else on the call has had any similar experiences, or if they found that to be a concern. Because in the survey, we identified vaccination with people with existing comorbidities as a priority, but narrowing that down, exactly what areas of that are the greater concerns is really interesting to hear about. And with infectious diseases, again, it's a really interesting area. So it'd be fantastic to hear if anyone else on the call has had that experience, if they've experienced anything like that in their clinical practice. But also, as you mentioned, we're getting a lot of comments about communication and feedback. One report in relation to feedback of safety information to healthcare workers on the ground, but we're also getting comments that this affects reporting hesitancy as well. So again, if you've experienced that in your country or in your pharmacovigilance practice, it'd be fantastic to hear from you on that front.
Thanks, Ryan, for picking that up. So there is a question that has been raised by Kibe Victor in the Q&A box, and he says, is it possible to revise the current EFI reporting tools to be comprehensive and capture the various age cohorts and populations as outlined by Ryan? Victor, I'm assuming you're referring to the Kenya EFI reporting tools, right? Unfortunately, Christabel, I'm going to throw this question to you as the Kenyan regulator. Do you have any comment towards Kibe?
Yeah, I guess that is something that can be looked on, but also to appreciate that the form is adopted from the WHO global form. So sometimes, again, it becomes difficult because this data is pulled into one global database. So breaking it down into different maybe components that are not aligned to the one that we submit can be a bit of a challenge, but we take note of the question, and probably in the future with discussion from the vaccines program, we can see if this is something that can be explored.
All right, thanks, Christabel, for that. There is a very interesting question from one anonymous attendee. And they ask, do you think the use of real-world data has a role to play in COVID-19 vaccination safety monitoring and in PV, and how do you think it would be relevant? So the question once again is, do you think real-world data has a role to play with COVID-19 vaccination safety monitoring? And if you think it is, how do you think it's going to be relevant? Thank you. Elizabeth, do you think you can be able to handle that?
Yeah, so I can't comment on that because I don't work in that area specifically, but I would almost like to throw the question back as to, is this something, you know, the Global Health Network and our collaborators could, you know, work on? Is this a topic for a working group to, you know, either provide access to information on that, or to do some work on that, to, you know, sorry, I dropped off the call earlier with my computer crashed, so I apologize if it was already mentioned by Ryan, but, you know, in terms of the going forward, one of the options of working groups is to hold expert webinars, for instance, with people working in specific areas, you know, to discuss these very issues. So I don't think we have the answers necessarily to those issues today, but more, is this the sort of thing that is a priority for going forward, and would people be interested in coming together to, you know, do some work in that area to answer those questions?
Yeah, thanks.
Well, may I jump in here a bit?
Yeah, yes, please.
Also? Yeah, so I want to say, I almost want to say yes to that, and to say that I think, at least from the post-marketing or post-introduction perspective, much of the work that we do in pharmacovigilance is really collecting real-world data. If you look at something like the passive reporting systems that many countries implement or have in place, and how that data is collected, I would say that that is collecting real-world data, right? And if done well, you know, that real-world data really gives you evidence of what is happening in real life with the medicines that are put out there. How are people day to day using these medicines, and how is it affecting people? So I think to a very large extent, I would say, yes, that's almost, I would say that's almost the crux of the post-introduction part of pharmacovigilance work. And then just moving on to just speaking a bit about the COVID, specifically about the COVID work that Brian has also shown, and the priorities. I'm looking at something like the safety of COVID-19 vaccination and pregnancy, and to say that, well, I haven't at the moment seen a lot of papers coming out from LMIC countries, but I do know that there are quite a number of studies, data that has been collected in other parts of the country that have shown to a large extent that there aren't any serious risks that are there, at least have been picked so far. And I think that is really one area that, you know, we could also focus in LMICs to get that kind of real world data in what's happening, recognizing that there are a number of countries in Africa that are currently doing one form of COVID-19 vaccine monitoring or the other. I know in Nigeria, there is a cohort event monitoring. Ghana has done a cohort event monitoring. Ethiopia has done cohort event monitoring. Kenya, so many countries are currently doing cohort event monitoring and other forms of active surveillance to collect data on cohort event monitoring. So I think it really presents an opportunity for countries to identify data related to pregnancy. Now, probably a number of countries have also approved, I don't know how many countries in Africa have approved the vaccination in children. I think it also presents us an opportunity to collect that kind of data in real life to see how these vaccines are working. And I think it does remain an area of priority, or it should remain an area of priority that people can focus on, and hopefully, we can do more studies. We can put additional effort to collect data in those areas that can inform policy decisions related to the vaccines.
Thank you, Comfort, for that explanation. Unfortunately, there's an issue with my system. May I please ask Comfort to support me in the rest of the moderation as I restart my computer?
All right, sure. Thank you, Wangwe. Sure. So let me go through the Q&A to see if there is any questions. In the meantime, Ryan, I just wanted to check with you and to see if there is any particular area that you think that you would want us to touch upon while during this session.
Thanks, Comfort. No, it's completely up to the participants, and it'd be just great to hear more about what people think are the current concerns in their region or in their country or their workplace, whether it relates to these priorities or not. If there are greater concerns, if there are concerns relating to anything that are not necessarily safety related, then it'd be fantastic to hear those as well. I just wanted to make a point on the back of that question, and thank you and Christoph for your fantastic answers to it. I can't remember who submitted the question, sadly, but I think it was someone with an anonymous profile. But I just wanted to, as Liz said, sort of throw the question back to them if they're still on the call, and ask what they thought about your responses, and perhaps ask them maybe even to elaborate a little bit on what they mean by real world data, because I think Christabel expanded on that very well. But are they interested in things like gathering data from social media and so on and so forth? So it'd be great if perhaps they could elaborate a little bit more on that. Comfort, if we haven't got any any response at the moment, I'll just address some of the questions in the Q&A, if that's okay.
Yes, please go ahead.
Fantastic. So there is a very pertinent question that is, why were there no questions included in the survey that were related to COVID-19 vaccine efficacy? And it is a good question because, of course, it's relevant. It's purely that at the time, as we're aware, there was a lot of data being published and shared in relation to vaccine efficacy globally, but there was a deficiency and equality in the amount of safety data that was being shared and generated. So that's why we focus more on the safety aspect rather than efficacy. Just going through the questions. I mean, Rebecca Chandler raises a very good question. Do countries feel that they have adequate support in the conduct of active vaccine safety surveillance studies? Again, a question to throw out to the floor or to the ISOP committee, but it'd be fantastic to hear what people thought on that. Do you feel you're getting enough support in the conduct of your safety studies? Is there more work that can be done? And if you do need support, what is that support that you need?
So would invite any mainly folks in the maybe pharmacovigilance in the country, regulatory in the NMRA, or in the EPI program, or any now in relation to the vaccines, or anybody who's working in pharmacovigilance, even academia, who would like to chime in on Rebecca's question, that's fine.
Comfort, I think that there is the support for active vaccine safety surveillance studies is required, because this is a process that is quite resource intensive. Some countries I know of, even in Uganda, there are some countries that are specifically studying safety of vaccines in pregnancy, but I don't know whether this has been applicable to COVID-19. I've not heard about safety of COVID-19 vaccines in pregnancy. But what I believe is that at least from the Uganda perspective, yes, the support is there. First of all, in establishing the system, maybe even registries can be considered, or like harmonization, having harmonized surveillance systems that are regional, that can quickly answer this because of the resource requirements needed. But I think that yes, to answer Rebecca's question, that support is needed. I don't think it's adequate as yet. And as you see, the priorities from Ryan's study, it is important, both from the patient side, from all stakeholders. The whole post-market surveillance, especially in low and middle income countries, is an important issue. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Helen, for that. Thank you, Helen, for that. Yes, Wangui, welcome back. I see you're back. And yes, please. You're free to take it on from here. Over to you.
All right. Thanks, Helen, for also answering that. I think if I can also comment to answer a question that was asked, do we have sufficient support when it comes to the vaccine safety surveillance currently happening in the LMIC countries? I would like to say yes, but there's still a lot of room for improvement. Obviously, as Christabel had said earlier, COVID-19 has brought a lot of, well, good things in addition to not so good things, but some of the benefits that we can all appreciate is the fact that online communication, open channel, especially between regulators and the rest of the stakeholders, including participants from the participants from the manufacturing companies, as well as mainly people who support the pharma industry. What has been happening is there's a lot, like I say, there's a lot of room for improvement. There are countries that have really significantly improved in online communication. Anytime there are issues and challenges towards reporting of any safety issues, whether COVID related or not. But we still do have countries where online communication has not been optimized still to date. Yeah, so we still do have countries where we are expected to report still manually on paper-based and requiring physical submission in some countries. Yeah, so those are the areas where I personally have had challenges, and we would require to sort of start having discussions around that area to sort of at least level the playing ground for all LMIC countries, so that if you're saying online reporting, especially now during the COVID pandemic season, then that should be, it should be a minimum requirement for everyone, and I think as ISOP, some of the collaborations we are looking towards is trying to have discussions around that area, looking for support framework that can be able to at least have a regulatory framework that can be able to support at minimum all the LMIC countries, at least to have a bare minimum. Yeah, that's just something I wanted to respond to, especially from the pharma industry perspective. I'm also seeing a comment from
maybe just to
from
add,
Dorothy Iowa.
Maybe Wangui, just to add on the point that you have said, I think yes, apart from just like the support that could be extended towards the LMIC, I think also collaborations is key, because reinventing the wheel becomes kind of more expensive. So for the countries that have done it and for the countries that are looking at doing it, so I think these conversations and just leveraging on the already available resources will also go a long way in strengthening the capacity, rather than everybody wanting to go alone to call its shots. And yeah, so that's also one thing that can help in these collaborations and just strengthening the surveillance.
I like that. Thank you. But I think we can move on to maybe the last comment, just to give one last comment before we wind up the session and hand over to both Ryan and Elizabeth. But there were two comments that I wanted to share, or rather one was a question that had been asked by Akin Made. Please, do you have information on the safety of COVID-19 on nursing mothers, especially on breastfeeding mothers? That's a question that was asked. And then there was also a comment by IWAC. We need support in terms of keeping up with new info, also healthcare workers contributing to the real world data. If more is reported and shared in terms of case studies, it will help in building knowledge. Then those at the facilities can provide better patient information. There are fears among those with comorbidities, pregnancies, and they need to confidently be assured as our patients. I totally agree with that. And maybe Ryan and Elizabeth, as I hand over to you, would you like to just give maybe one last word to Akin Made and IWAC's comments?
Off the top of my head, breastfeeding isn't my area of expertise, but again, it's good to expand on these areas of women's health and safety in relation to the COVID-19 vaccine. Again, it's something that's good to take in mind as we discuss this idea of forming working groups in the future. And if we do create groups centered around pregnancy, maternal health, childcare, then it's absolutely something that should be borne in mind and represented in those working groups. I'm just looking for Dorothy's comment.
Maybe I can read that for you again, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
So IWAC said, we need support in keeping up with new information as healthcare workers contributing in real world data. If more is reported and shared, case studies, it will help in building knowledge. And then those who are working at health facilities can be able to provide better patient information. There are fears amongst those with comorbidities, pregnancies, and we need to create confidence to assure our patients. So I guess that was just a comment, and maybe I wanted to ask if you would react more on that.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Fantastic comment. And yeah, thank you, Dorothy. Really interesting to hear. And really interesting, as we saw in the results of some of the surveys as well, that this aspect of safety of administration of the vaccines and comorbidities is really something that we've seen an interest in across the board. So really good to hear about the range of interest and the different conditions that we've discussed today as well. But also interesting to hear about the communications aspect. And I guess a lot of that comes down to awareness and educating when you talk about increasing reporting, but also the very important point that you made earlier about ensuring that feedback is cascaded down to all levels of people engaged in pharmacovigilance and all levels of the healthcare system. So yeah, absolutely, a really important point. If you don't mind, I'd like to move on to the final section of this workshop, if that's okay. I'd like to thank Wangi, Comfort, and all of the ISOP EC for their masterful conduction of that discussion session. I think that was absolutely fantastic, and we heard some really interesting points. Something that I have alluded to, or that we've discussed quite a lot in this discussion and the next steps and in the presentation, was our plan to form working groups to address some of the priorities that we have identified in the survey. So as you can see on the screen, we have a top 10. These are in no particular order. And what we want to identify is, as time has moved on, as the pandemic has progressed, and given what we've heard in this discussion today and what you've seen in the chat, what do we now think? Which of these are the key areas for focus? And moving forwards, how are we going to go about addressing this? And so in a couple of minutes before this workshop ends, we're going to run a poll. The poll consists of 2 questions that you should be able to see on your screen when we begin it. It's not live at the moment. And the first question lists the top 10 priorities identified in the survey. So it'll list these priorities in no particular order. What we're asking you to do is, from this list, please select 3 elements of pharmacovigilance that you believe to be the current highest priorities at this point in the COVID-19 pandemic, where support, training, and guidance are needed. A quick note about the poll functionality. It won't cap the number of responses you give. So as there are 10 priorities, you could select all 10. So please only select 3 responses to the question. Just a caveat in relation to the poll. As you've seen from the presentations and from ISOP's work and from Global Pharmacovigilance and the Global Health Network's work, this workshop seeks to gather consensus on the current priorities in low and middle income countries. So what I would say to any participants on the call that are based in high income countries, if you have experience working in supporting or have a personal interest in pharmacovigilance activities and LMICs, then we do warmly welcome you to contribute to the poll. Perhaps if you wouldn't consider yourself to have an interest in PV activities and LMICs, we kindly ask that you do not complete the poll at this time. I hope that makes sense. Again, just to reiterate, for the first question, when the poll goes live, please do just select 3 of the possible options, no more, no less. And now I think Zainab, I think that's all of the points of the poll considered. So if you're happy to launch, yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. Once again, the list itself is in no particular order. They've just been grouped to aid the reading of the poll. And yeah, if you could just select 3 options for the first question. We'll leave that up for 5 minutes or so, and then we'll wrap up the workshop. Thank you. So whilst this poll is still running, we'll leave it open for a few more minutes, as I realise there's a lot of text there, and it could take a while to go through. I just wanted to elaborate a little bit on our next steps for a working group formation. So at the end of this poll and this workshop, we should have a quantitative ranking of which of these priorities attendees think are the most important aspects of pharmacovigilance in LMICs during the pandemic at this moment. We'll also do a qualitative analysis of the discussion and the conversation. And once we have our highest ranking priorities, we will send a survey to all of the membership of Global Pharmacovigilance and of the attendees of this workshop, and invite those members to join these working groups if they find that they are relevant to their area. We'll then look to set up individual calls with the different working groups and begin their formation. What I will say is there are perhaps aspects or pharmacovigilance themes in this poll that are quite hard to address in a working group, or impractical to address in a working group. So it may be the case that we don't necessarily form working groups to address the highest ranked priorities, but we will report this and we'll seek other methods to address them as well. So just to reiterate, after this workshop, probably early next week, all of the attendees and all members of Global Pharmacovigilance will be emailed this survey that'll detail the results of this poll and invite people to join working groups. We'll be sure to share that with you all. Just a final note that we will be doing the vast majority of communication from now on via the Global Pharmacovigilance mailing list. So if you are not yet a member of Global Pharmacovigilance, I very much encourage you to sign up. We will put a link in the chat, just again to the Global Pharmacovigilance homepage. You can go there, and if you're not currently a member, please do sign up. It is completely free and all of the resources are open access.
Thank you. Thanks, Ryan, for taking us through that. As we've come to the end of our webinar today, I would like to take this opportunity and really thank you everyone who has been able to participate in today. To all the participants who've taken the time from their day-to-day, their workplace, and just their normal duties to just come and join us for this event. We really thank you for taking and for really taking the time to come and be with us. I'd also take this opportunity and thank all our chairs, our panelists today, our presenters. Thanks, Ryan, again for taking us through the results of the of the survey that we were able to conduct about 4 months ago, and it really has been an eye-opener just to see where we are at in terms of pharmacovigilance, the areas that we can be able to synergize also with some of the collaborations that were highlighted earlier by Christabel. And we really have received a lot of comments. We've received a lot of questions. Some of them were answered, some of them were not answered satisfactorily. But I just want to assure everyone that all this data will be gathered together and they're going to be responded to in writing. For anyone who feels that any of their comments, questions were not satisfactorily answered, just know that we will get back to you on email and you'll be able to get your response. As was said earlier, the recordings of these sessions, along with any other additional material, they will be shared. There is a link that will be shared where you'll be able to find all this that will be posted. I believe right now there is a link that is being shared on the chat box. Please just review that before you log out, just so that you can be able to, get access to all this material that is there. We would be grateful if you would just complete the evaluation form. If you've not, if you were not able to get access to it earlier, it's also going to be shared on the chat box now and also on email. Please fill those. And it will be able to just help us be able to plan better for other events and also know what really benefited everyone during today's webinar. With that, I think I would like to take this opportunity and thank everyone once again for all your participation. And I believe it's at this point that we are going to close off the seminar. Thank you.